Hey brothers and sisters. So I know it's been a while since I made a video, and there's been a few things on my mind today, so I want to share them with you. Hopefully it's not too distracting because I've got a little bit of background noise here today. But I want to talk to you a little bit about God's grace and God's mercy and what that looks like in the life of the believer, because so many people, when they start walking with the Lord, and I was one of them, thought that, as soon as I started walking with him, that he would take all the things out of me, just get rid of this flesh, Lord, get rid of these desires that my flesh has, and get rid of these things that my fallen man did before I knew you. And as I've progressed in my walk with the Lord, I've realized that that is not something that's going to happen. It's not, there's a part we play in our walk, there's a part that the Lord plays in our walk. And yes, he will take some things right out of us right away, and he removes those things and we don't have to struggle with them. Then there are other things that we have to walk through because there's something in the learning, there's something in the journey, and it helps us and strengthens us in our walk in the Lord. So the Lord was showing me something in my studying, and he was showing me in Genesis 3:24 where God put, when Adam and Eve disobeyed him in the garden, God put a flaming sword and cherubims at the east gate. And that was to keep people from getting into the tree of life. Now, we have two choices, just like Adam and Eve had. We have a choice to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, or we have a choice to eat from the tree of life. And Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. So had they eaten from the tree of life, they would have been permanently stuck in that sinful nature for the rest of eternity. So that's why God put that flaming sword at the east of the garden, so that they could not get to that tree. And the Lord was talking to me about what that tree represents. And if you think about it, he put a flaming sword next to the tree of life, and that tree of life is basically, it's like the Holy of Holies. It's the deepest parts of God. It is what we want to eat from, the fruit that we want to eat from, the fruit that makes us and transitions us into the image of Jesus Christ. And so in order to get to that tree, because that's the tree I want to eat from. I don't want to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil anymore. I ate from that tree until the time I was born again, and now I want to eat from the tree of life. But to get to that tree, I have to walk through that flaming sword. I have to walk through that scorching fire. I have to walk through that sword, which is basically a knife or a chisel. So those are things that are going to be rough and things that are going to be hard. Like that fire is going to burn and purify. The sword is going to cut off things that are not of God. And as I was reading in Genesis 3:24, I was just like, wow, Lord, your word basically tells us that if you want to eat from the tree of life, you're going to walk through the scorching flames and the sword. You're going to feel the ramifications of pressing in to get to the Holy of Holies, of pressing in to get to that tree of life. And that takes me to my second point of what I wanted to talk about today, and that is when we get burnt getting to that tree, when we get cut, when we get scraped up because we have walked through something that has caused pain or suffering in our life, we're gonna feel that. We're gonna feel the pain, we're gonna feel the heartache or whatever that is. And a lot of people start judging themselves at that point, and they're like, I've messed up. I've been, put through the fire now because, or I made this mistake or that mistake, and now God's not gonna love me anymore. He's given up on me, and he's surely washed his hands of me because I continue to keep trying to do this and I keep making the same mistake over and over again. And people don't understand that God's mercies and grace, they're new every day. God's mercies are new every day. He knows we're going to make mistakes. He knows we're going to struggle. He knows that there's going to be good days, there's going to be bad days, and there's going to be days that we just completely mess it up from the time we get up to the time we go to bed. It happens. And if we're walking in our flesh, those days are going to happen. We as believers have to learn to walk in the Spirit. The scriptures, Galatians 5:16 says that if you walk in the Spirit, you will not fulfill the desires of the flesh. But if we're going to be honest with ourselves, who does not struggle from time to time, or even in sections, periods of their life, seasons of their life where they struggle being in the flesh? Every one of us do. We all struggle with it. But that's where God's mercies come in. That's where His grace comes in. That's where He allows us to make mistakes. But He gives us an advocate and a friend in Jesus where we can go and confess our sins, and He's faithful to forgive us. The walk of a believer is not easy. And I think that if we knew what we were going to walk through as a believer in the beginning, we probably would have not continued on our pursuit of the Lord, because we would not have been ready to handle what the Lord wanted to do in us, through us, and with us. But as we progress in our walk, the Lord begins to prepare us and to cleanse us and to get us ready for the next stage and the next level. So it is a process. And that process is what we need to keep in mind. It doesn't happen overnight. Your transformation will not happen overnight. You will not give your life to the Lord and then the next month have absolutely no struggles in life. Even Jesus had his own temptations, and He was our example. So if the enemy came to tempt Jesus, the enemy's going to come to tempt you and me. So, knowing that these things are going to happen, knowing that God will give us grace to make mistakes, grace to overcome things, and that's what it's for. That grace is a bridge. It's a bridge from I want to know you and I want to follow you to I'm walking 100% all the time in the Spirit. And that's not something that's easily done. That is something, you're there. Like, if you're in that Spirit all the time, you've made it and you're there. And you're pretty much letting the Holy Spirit have His way with you, and let Jesus do in you and through you what He wants to do. That is the only way that we can be... That's the only way that we can be hands and feet of Jesus all the time. Like, when I'm in the store, I will see people and I'll see them lame or crippled, and I want to help them. I want to go over and I want to reach out to them, and I want to lay hands on them, I want to pray over them, and I want to help them walk or whatever their ailment is. But there's a part of me that says, well, maybe what if it doesn't happen? What if you go and lay hands on somebody? What if you touch them and it doesn't happen then? Because that's happened in the past. But the Lord showed me something. Walking in the Spirit allows the Lord to be able to work through you. It's kind of like when you're operating in the Spirit and not in the flesh, you become like a garden hose where the Lord can flow in and out. He can flow through you and out to somebody else. And I have seen the power of walking in the Spirit and what that looks like. There's been people that I've prayed over, there's been people that I've laid hands on, and I've removed things out of them just like that. Like, there was no hesitation. I felt the power in my hands, I felt the power in my body. The person I was praying for felt the power. Then there's other times where I prayed over somebody and something didn't happen, and then I start, okay, well, what happened? What is the difference? And that is the walking in the flesh. That is the doubt that I have that the Lord wouldn't come through. Now, He always wants to help somebody or heal somebody, but it was me that hindered Him because maybe I wasn't quite where I should be. Maybe I was struggling in my life, or I was struggling in my walk. Maybe, I had unrepentant sin from being too fleshly the day before. There's all kinds of things that happen in the life of a believer. But I'm saying all these things because I want to be realistic, because nobody really talks about what it looks like to be a believer, what it looks like to walk out these things, and why, when one day you can cast a headache out of somebody and the next day you can't. Why? It's because of the process that we have to go through. And when we're learning and we have our ups and downs, when we're in the spirit, when we're in the flesh, that looks different. It looks two totally different realities. But I say all of this to say that God understands what we're going through. He understands that there are days that we struggle. There are days where we find it harder to stay in the Spirit. And that's where God's mercy and grace come in. And just so you know, some people are so... they'll hold on to the shame that came with whatever the sin was. Maybe they have a bad day and they yelled at their spouse, or they were snippy with their spouse or something. But then they don't want anyone else to know about this, and they don't confess it to the Lord because they're ashamed or embarrassed, or they feel guilty, which, by the way, is not from the Lord. That condemnation comes from the devil. But instead of just saying, like, oh my gosh, like, I didn't want to do that, but I did do that. I'm sorry, Lord, and I confess it, and I ask you to come alongside me and help me with that so I don't do that again, Lord. Convict me if I start doing those things again. Then God gives us grace to make those mistakes. And that grace will carry us until we get it right. That grace will carry us until we're operating and walking in the Spirit 24/7 without any peaks of the flesh. Because that flesh constantly rivals against the Spirit. They're at enmity with each other. And the flesh is always... the flesh is always going to have something to say, and we have to learn how to not allow that flesh to be the one in the forefront, to allow that Spirit to be the one that's going to shine forth, so the Lord can use us as a vessel. So I know this was kind of like random this morning, but it's kind of what was on my mind, and I just wanted to share this with you because I want you to understand and realize that you're going to make mistakes. If you don't make them today and you don't make them tomorrow, you're going to make a mistake next month, next week. And it's okay. It's okay. God is not going to throw you out the door because you made a mistake. He is not going to turn his back on you. He's not going to say, well, you know what? You've done it one too many times, and I'm just tired of working with you. And so now you have to deal with it yourself. God's not like that. He's not like that at all. He's patient, and he's loving, kind, and he is merciful, and he's long-suffering. And if it is something that you are truly working to get over and you ask him for help with it, he'll come alongside of you and he will help you. He will help you to get that issue or that problem under control. But in the meantime, while you're learning how to walk in the Spirit and to be an example of Jesus Christ, that grace and mercy is there for you. So don't beat yourself up over it when you have a rough day, when you have a season where you're struggling with some things that you're trying to get over and you're just like, why does it keep happening over and over and over? He understands, and he'll give you the grace and mercy to help you through. And then we will be able to extend that same grace and mercy to those in our life who are not quite there yet, maybe aren't walking with the Lord and struggling. Instead of condemning them as the world would, as the devil would, then we can extend that grace and mercy to them too, while they're learning, while they're being drawn to Christ. So I hope that this helps you today in your walk and it strengthens you. God bless you all.